Is Putin's regime on the brink of military collapse? After losing over 1 million soldiers, destroying equipment worth decades of investment, and facing the harshest sanctions in modern history, many analysts say Russia simply can't sustain this war anymore. But is that really true? 3.5 years after the invasion of Ukraine began, the numbers are brutal. More than 4,000 tanks confirmed destroyed, hundreds of billions of dollars in economic losses, and a human bloodbath that might be Russia's biggest military disaster since World War II. So how does a country even keep fighting after losing so much? The answer is more complicated and more alarming than most people think. So today, we're digging into whether Putin's regime is really running on empty, or if they've actually found a way to keep this brutal war going indefinitely. The data you're about to see throws out the usual talking points and reveals a much more complicated picture of the true state of Russia's military machine. Get ready to find out if we're witnessing the end of Russian military power. When the first Russian armored columns crossed into Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, the Kremlin was betting on a lightning campaign. The plan was crystal clear. Take Kyiv in 72 hours, force the Ukrainian government to surrender, and present the world with a done deal. But what actually happened was the complete opposite. Those famous armored convoys heading for the Ukrainian capital turned into death traps. That 64-kilometer line of vehicles stretching from Belarus to the outskirts of Kyiv wasn't a show of strength. It was a giant sitting duck. Ukrainian forces using guerrilla tactics and armed with Western-supplied anti-tank weapons turned those formations into scrap metal graveyards. The Oryx project, which tracks military losses using verified visual evidence, recorded shocking numbers early on. In just the first 100 days of the war, Russia lost more military gear than some countries have in their entire arsenal. We're talking hundreds of T-80s and T-72s, top-of-the-line armored vehicles, and artillery systems representing decades of investment. But the cold numbers don't tell the whole story. Between March and May 2022, Russia lost a disproportionate number of high-ranking officers. Generals, colonels, brigade commanders, wiped out at a rate not seen since World War II. This bleeding of experienced leadership left a command vacuum that echoed through the entire Russian military. The psychological impact hit fast. Units trained for quick, decisive operations got bogged down in brutal urban combat against a resistance that had been totally underestimated. Morale tanked, desertions rose, and the first real signs that something was deeply broken in Russia's war strategy started showing. While Russia kept bleeding on the battlefield, a second front opened, the economic siege led by the West. The sanctions from NATO countries and their allies weren't just the usual slap-on-the-wrist stuff. They were targeted strikes against the heart of Russia's military machine. Tech restrictions hit especially hard. Advanced semiconductors, satellite navigation systems, precision optics, and military communications gear, all of it relied on Western imports. Overnight, Russia got cut off from supply chains that had taken decades to build. Companies like Intel, AMD, and Nvidia completely pulled out. European manufacturers of optical components, crucial for targeting systems, also halted exports. That created a cascade of problems for producing guided weapons. Things got worse as major corporations exited the Russian market. It wasn't just military tech firms. Suppliers of seemingly neutral components turned out to be key to war production. Makers of specialty tires, high-grade steel producers, even synthetic rubber suppliers, all gone, leaving major holes in the supply chain. The financial impact was just as brutal. With part of its central bank reserves frozen and limited access to international banking, financing a full-scale war became a logistical nightmare. Energy export revenues, Russia's economic lifeblood, plummeted due to embargoes and boycotts. At this breaking point, Russia pulled off something nobody expected. Instead of collapsing under the weight of military losses and sanctions, the country launched a full-blown economic transformation, something that looked a lot like total war mobilization. The strategy was clear: turn the entire economy into a war machine. The state defense giant Rostec got unlimited resources to ramp up production. Car factories were repurposed to make armored vehicles. Appliance plants started building drone components. And the creativity didn't stop there. Tiny repair shops turned into ammo producers. Food processing factories adapted to make basic electronics for military use. Even textile mills started making protective gear and parachute parts. Human mobilization was just as intense. Nearly 300,000 reservists were called up in September 2022. Despite early chaos, they managed to fill the worst personnel gaps. Even more crucially, tens of thousands of skilled workers were shifted into war production, and the results started to show. According to both Russian government data and Western sources, artillery shell production jumped from around 1 million rounds in 2022 to over 3 million by 2024. Tank repair and modernization hit levels not seen since the Soviet era, with hundreds of armored vehicles restored and returned to service every month. One of the most surprising things about Russia's military machine has been its ability to come up with creative fixes to problems that seemed impossible. When high-precision missiles started running low due to the chip shortage, Russian engineers improvised, and it worked. Take the S-300 air defense missiles, for example. These were originally meant to shoot down planes, but they were reprogrammed to hit ground targets. They're not as accurate as purpose-built ground attack missiles, but against wide-area targets, they're deadly. To get around the tech sanctions, Russia rolled out the now famous FAB glide bombs. These are basically dumb bombs retrofitted with basic guidance kits. They cost a fraction of smart missiles, but still hit with brutal force. The FAB 500, for instance, packs 500 kilograms of explosives and uses modified commercial GPS to land with decent accuracy. Then there's the drone revolution, probably the most successful adaptation so far. When advanced military drones ran short, Russia built a whole industry around cheap commercial FPV, first-person view, drones. These little guys cost a few $100 each, but they're mass-produced by the thousands and have become a battlefield game-changer. Russia also ramped up cooperation with countries like Iran and North Korea. Iranian Shahid drones are now being built under license inside Russia, and North Korean ammo has started arriving in serious volumes. These partnerships helped Russia bypass some of the toughest sanctions. By August 2025, 3.5 years into the war, Russia presents a strange paradox. Despite losing massive amounts of gear and troops, its forces are still operational across multiple fronts. Oryx confirms over 20,000 pieces of equipment destroyed, including more than 4,000 tanks. And those are just the confirmed visual losses. The real number is definitely higher. Even so, Russia's military isn't just holding on. It's even expanding in some ways. Simultaneous operations across multiple sectors of the front are still going strong. The heavy use of FPV drones, saturation artillery strikes, and coordinated attacks show that for all its losses, Russia has found a way to stay deadly on the battlefield. Territorial gains have been slow, but steady. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, SIZE, Russia grabbed only 1% more Ukrainian land since January 2024. But each square kilometer cost hundreds of lives and millions in lost equipment. Russia's current strategy seems to accept these losses as part of a bigger game plan. Instead of aiming for fast breakthroughs, they've shifted to a grinded-out approach, using their bigger ammo output to wear Ukraine down over time. Behind all the production gains and military resilience, Russia's facing deep systemic decay, maybe even worse than battlefield losses. Turning the entire economy into a war machine is creating structural distortions that echo what helped bring down the Soviet Union. One of the biggest problems is the shortage of skilled labor. With hundreds of thousands of young men either dead or having fled to avoid the draft, key sectors of the economy are hurting badly for talent. The tech industry, already hammered by sanctions, lost a big chunk of its top minds. Russia's now relying on old gear more than ever. T-62 tanks, designed back in the 60s, have been pulled out of storage and upgraded for frontline use. Sure, they work, but they're no match for modern systems Russia lost early in the war. Logistics are maxed out. Western intel says Russia's cannibalizing equipment just to keep things running, stripping parts off wrecked tanks, moving electronics between platforms, and refurbishing old ammo with makeshift components. The transport system's under huge stress. The Russian railways, usually pretty reliable, are running full tilt to move troops and gear. Bottlenecks are more common, and they're hitting both the military and the civilian economy. It wouldn't be fair to talk about Russia's problems without acknowledging that Ukraine's struggling too, after more than 3 years of brutal war. Ukraine's resistance has been brave and surprisingly effective, but it's come at a steep price in both people and hardware. Western ammo stockpiles, vital to Ukraine's defense, are running thin. NATO countries realize their own reserves were built for smaller, short-term conflicts. Their peacetime defense industries are now scrambling to keep up without gutting their own defenses. Ukraine's lost a lot of Western gear too. German Leopards, American Bradleys, and other advanced systems have been destroyed, costing not just money but years of hard-earned tech capability. Logistics are getting tougher too. Fixing Western equipment often requires very specific parts and know-how that aren't always available in country. Some damaged armored vehicles sit idle for months waiting on parts from Europe or the US. The human toll is massive. Numbers vary, but Ukrainian sources admit to tens of thousands of casualties. President Zelensky said in December 2024 that Ukrainian forces had 43,000 dead and 370,000 wounded, though other estimates go even higher. This war has turned into something almost no analyst predicted, a long, grinding conflict where resilience, military and civilian, matters more than tech or tactics. And both sides are under very different but equally crushing time pressure. For Russia, the big question is whether it can keep up this level of war production and social mobilization without cracking. Their economy is running in emergency mode, which can't last forever. Shoving resources into war is causing shortages and inflation in everyday life. The demographic pressure is also brutal. Russia already had a population crisis before the war. Now, between battlefield deaths and young people fleeing the draft, the decline is accelerating. Every fallen soldier isn't just a military loss. It's a future worker, a father, a citizen who's gone for good. For Ukraine, the challenge is keeping global support while rebuilding freed areas at the same time. Their dependence on external aid makes sense, but it also opens them up to political and economic risk. If Western governments change or public support fades, Ukraine could be left hanging. The return of Donald Trump to the U.S. presidency in January 2025 added new uncertainty. His calls to end the war fast and his wild claims, like saying millions have died, signal a possible shift in U.S. policy that could shake up the whole conflict. 3.5 years into the Russia-Ukraine war, we're facing some uncomfortable truths that don't fit into simple narratives. Despite colossal losses, including over 1 million casualties by some estimates and more than 20,000 verified pieces of lost equipment, Russia has not only kept fighting, it's adapted to the realities of modern war. But that adaptation comes with deep systemic costs that could shape Russia's future for decades. Turning the economy into a war engine might be impressive, but it's creating the same kind of distortions that helped topple past regimes. Ukraine, meanwhile, has shocked the world with its resilience, but it's paying a huge price too. And its dependence on Western support, while necessary, creates long-term vulnerabilities. What we're seeing isn't just a regional conflict, it's a major stress test for two very different models of how to run a society. Russia's authoritarian adaptability versus Ukraine's Western-backed democratic resistance. If you want to keep up with what's really happening in the Russia-Ukraine war, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll get updates straight from the battlefront.